Well, this is the month and this is the weekend that all sorts of sports junkies across the nation and across the world at this point call themselves draft nerds. But we got the draft nerd here. We got Jeremy Green on the line from ESPN Nashville. You can catch him on Twitter at ESPN Draft Nerd. Jeremy, what's going on today?
Hey, man, how are you? Just experiencing the draftmas season.
Oh, man, this is your time of year. This is it, right? You get geeked up for this.
I mean, I've always said I'm kind of like the groundhog, but people only care if I see my shadow for about 3 days out of the year, and then I can just hide back in my hole for 362 days.
Where did the love of the NFL draft start?
Well, I was always one of those kids that knew that I couldn't run a 4.7 40. So if I wanted to experience anything working in the league, it was going to be doing it this way. So, you know, I started watching tape when I was younger. The draft always really intrigued me. And then as time went on, you know, you keep doing it, and 10,000 hour rule, you do anything for long enough and eventually you become decent at it. And then ESPN gave me an opportunity, and here we are.
Well, Jeremy, we'll start with this because you must be pretty decent at this because everybody's just catching up on Travon Walker. So he's a freak out of Georgia that can wreck an offense. And what do you see out of him? Because it looks like he's going to go off the top of the board at number one.
I had this. I mean, you got to say it. Trent Baalke is known for this. He's a height, weight, speed, RAS kind of guy. And it never made sense with Aidan Hutchinson. And I started hearing things out of Jacksonville that they weren't in love with Hutchinson. Detroit wasn't in love with Hutchinson. And then it became, well, who is it you're going to fall in love with? And you look at somebody that is an RAS analytics kind of guy like Trent Baalke, and Travon Walker clicks every box. The thing that makes me nervous is you are on the best defense I've ever seen. This is the most talented defense in the history of college football, in my opinion. And I never saw the high-level production. He got overshadowed by Jordan Davis. He got overshadowed at times by Devontae Wyatt. And that makes me nervous. Now, that being said, you don't shoehorn him into any position. He can play virtually every technique. I've seen him do almost all of it. And there are some people that think he can stand up and play off the edge. So, I mean, he's an athletic monster. And if you can unlock the potential, then I certainly see how he could be like an Aldon Smith, someone that Trent Baalke drafted when he was in San Francisco. I don't love it, but this is a draft where beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Top 10s across this industry, they don't look anything alike. You know, I really love Sauce Gardner. I really love Kvon Thibodeaux. And I know a lot of people don't. So we knew this was going to be weird. We knew when we got to this week, you would start seeing things that maybe you didn't expect, and Jacksonville just kicked it off at number one.
You mentioned Aidan Hutchinson. So how much are you a metrics guy, a measurables guy in the workouts versus the game tape? And did it cause people hesitation and reservation with Aidan Hutchinson against Georgia when he was kind of erased from that game?
That is the tape that bothers me. And now you asked how into the the combine matters to me. I'll be honest with you. If I was an agent and I had a player that was that was a lock first rounder, I would never allow them to work out at the combine. Only bad can happen. And I know people will say, but what about Travon Walker? He blew it out of the water. And so people see the metrics on him. Travon was a teens pick. He was a guy that I looked at going to the Baltimore Ravens at 14, Philadelphia at 15, and he blew it out of the water. That's one thing. Aidan Hutchinson was fine. He did most of the drills, and there was what I saw on tape from him was exactly what I saw from him at the combine. And I've said the entire process that I think he's a good, solid stand-up double. I've compared him to Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals, and there's a merit to that. Trey Hendrickson's a well-paid, very good pass rusher that helped his team to the Super Bowl. I just never knew – I never saw a number one overall pick in him. And the Georgia tape was bothersome because he was completely irrelevant for the vast majority of that game. And that makes me nervous on the biggest stage. But then you go back to the Ohio State tape, and he dominated Nicholas Petit-Frere, who is going to go in the back end of the first round, beginning of the second, somewhere in there. And so it's a balance. To me, if you go in with Aidan Hutchinson knowing that he's never going to be Khalil Mack, he's never going to be Von Miller, but he very well could be a Trey Hendrickson, everyman kind of lunch pail defensive end that I mean, I could see him being a 10-sack guy in the NFL. I just don't know that anybody's going to be happy with that when he went at 2. He could end up being one of those players that's looked at as a bit of a disappointment, not necessarily because of his production on the field, but because of where he goes in the draft.
We got Jeremy Green on the line, ESPN Nashville. Catch him on Twitter. Follow him right there at ESPN Draft Nerd. Appreciate Jeremy being here, breaking down the NFL draft, of course, Thursday through Saturday. So give us some hidden gems out there that maybe not a whole lot of people are talking about or you think might be undervalued at this point.
I've said this is the weirdest draft that I've ever done. And I've been doing this for almost a decade. I've never seen this little agreement in the top 15. Some people love Derek Stingley, some people don't. But where the real meat of this draft is from 25 to 75. The guy you take at 75 is going to be very close in grade to a middle first-round player. And that's very rare. So this draft is incredibly deep. Receivers very good. I look at a guy like George Pickens out of Georgia. If it wasn't for the knee injury, I think he would be a no doubt top 20 player in this draft because he can play the X, he can play the Y. That's kind of a rare trait. I mean, you look at a guy like Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State, Jameson Williams. These are guys that do a lot of their best work in the slot. Traylon Burks from Arkansas. I look at a guy in George Pickens that I think is going to go higher maybe than he should with some of the medical red flags. But if all of that is good, he may end up being the best receiver in this draft.
Jeremy, you brought up Kvon Thibodeaux and some recent concerns about him being, and we have only heard this in the last, really pop up in the last 5 to 10 years where players are more concerned about celebrity, possibly more concerned about setting themselves up for future careers. Does that bother you, concern you with him?
With a defensive end, no. If he was a quarterback, that might bother me. But I look at Thibodeaux, and what you're referring to is he basically made a comment of it was down to Alabama and Oregon, and he wanted to play for the best franchise in all of college football, and he was referring to Nike and not Oregon. And then he went around and told people how much money he made in NIL. And none of that really bothers me. I just need to know, are you going to find the moves? Kvon Thibodeaux is way more athlete, way more just freak of nature than he is football player right now. There's not a lot of moves. That's what scares me with him. Now, some guys come to the league. Khalil Mack didn't have a lot of moves when he came in. And he had beaten up on lower level competition, and he just got better year after year after year. And I do think Thibodeaux has some of that in him. It's just a question of, can that be brought out? I do like him standing up better. So I like him with the New York Giants at 7 better than I do, say, the Jets at 4. And I do think the Jets are higher on I am a Jets fan and know that team reasonably well. They like Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State better than they like Thibodeaux. And I don't think that's as different of a thought. I think there are a lot of teams that feel that way. And it's a lot personality. But there's still some things in the tape that should scare you too. I think the personality things are overblown. But the fears that I get from watching the tape, I think, are undersold.
Yeah, we just talked to our Florida State guy right before you, and he mentioned the Jermaine Johnson news and him being looked at number 4 to the Jets. Well, how much faith do you have in your front office to make the right moves? We know the Jets' legacy of NFL drafts.
So, as I said, I'm a Florida State fan and I'm a Jets fan. And for as long as I can remember, I have had this tradition of I wear a Jets attire with Florida State over it or vice versa through the draft process, hoping that eventually the draft will stop being just a pit of sadness for me because I pull for the worst drafting team in the NFL. I have a lot of faith in Joe Douglas. For me, maybe it's we took Kyle Brady over Warren Sapp. I could do that for Vernon Golston. I could do that for a really long time. So for me, I'm looking at 4 picks in the top 38 going, yes, this is my favorite time of year, and my team has the most draft capital. But there's that little thing in the back of my head going, how are we going to mess this up? What am I going to be angry about on Saturday? And my hope is that you go Sauce Gardner at 4, you go Jermaine Johnson at 10, and I'm very happy but it's the Jets. So I always have that sinking feeling that whoever it is that I have the least faith in, that's who we'll end up with.
Yeah, it's tough to mess up 4 out of the top 38. So they've set themselves up, but now they got to execute. Jeremy Green's on the line with us, ESPN Asheville. Please check out his work. And Jeremy, when we get to quarterback, can you remember a draft void of great, I don't want to say potential, just great production at the collegiate level? Well, we saw that as well, but not the great prospects at the quarterback position that we see right now.
I remember the EJ Manuel, Geno Smith draft. And I'm going to say the same thing about this draft that I said about that one. This is a lot like trying to shop at Goodwill. It's all flawed in some shape, form, or fashion. It's just a question of what can you live with. I am on record saying there will not be a quarterback in the top 19 picks of this draft, and there shouldn't be. None of these guys should go in the top 19. Now, the flex point there is at 20 with Pittsburgh. That's where I start to like Malik Willis because I trust Pittsburgh. I've seen them develop. And I understand this was a different regime. This was a different time. But I watched them take a prospect in Ben Roethlisberger that had a lot of the same questions. They're very different players, but they had a lot of the same questions of their ability to discern defenses and go through reads. And I watched them turn Ben Roethlisberger into a Hall of Famer. And with the bridge with Trubisky, I love the fit for Malik Willis there. I can't stand it anywhere else. Seattle would be a disaster. Atlanta would be a disaster. We are Carolina Panthers affiliates. I have been screaming as loud as I could. I don't care who you take at 6. You're doing it wrong. And now I think it's coming around that Carolina's going to end up taking a tackle at 6. All the quarterbacks get pushed down. But there's a fit that I like for all of them. I could see every one of these quarterbacks being successful. I'm not telling you they're going to be Hall of Famers. I'm not even telling you they're going to be Pro Bowlers, which is the most empty accolade in all of sports. But there are places that I could like them all. I like Malik Willis with Pittsburgh. I like Desmond Ridder with the Tennessee Titans. Similar builds, similar regimes. Luke Fickell and Mike Vrabel are very close. I know Fickell has been all over Vrabel that Ridder is the quarterback he needs with Tannehill getting ready to turn 34 years old. I like the fit there. I like Ridder in Seattle. I like Matt Corral with Arthur Smith and the Atlanta Falcons. Kenny Pickett's a little harder of an evaluation for me because he's so much older. One of the things that nobody talks about with Kenny Pickett, he's 6 months younger than Sam Darnold is.
Yeah, that's an eye-opener right there for a guy that's been in the league now for what? He was in the 2018 draft, right, Sam Darnold?
This will be his 5th year starting. He is 6 months younger than Kenny Pickett. Or 6 months older than Kenny Pickett, excuse me. And I just look at it talent for talent. Sam Darnold's a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett is. You know, Kenny Pickett was a back end of day 2, beginning of day 3 pick until he did that thing that has always made me nervous with quarterbacks. I call this Chris Winkie disorder. You're way better when you're grown man body. Chris Winkie was in his late 20s. He was the Heisman Trophy winner because he was 10 years older than a lot of the guys he was playing against. It's not as drastic with Kenny Pickett, but the decision-making got better. It was very obvious that he matured. I just don't know how much better he's going to be. My fear is that he's exactly today who he will be 5 years from now. Now, with the New Orleans Saints, I'm not averse to that. I just don't want you to do it in the first round.
Jeremy Green, ESPN Asheville. Jeremy, besides your Jets with 4 picks in the first 38 selections, is there another team out there that's setting themselves up to do themselves the most good?
I love that New Orleans traded up. I love that Philadelphia got – that's one of the few trades that I've ever seen in the draft where I liked it on both sides. I like what Philadelphia did, getting the pick for next year. If Jalen Hurts doesn't work out, next year's a drastically better quarterback draft with Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Tyler Van Dyke from Miami. I like what they did. Now, in terms of this draft, there's a team that I have zero faith in, but they control so many cards in this draft, and it's the Houston Texans. At 3, they can do anything they want. The Derek Stingley is heating up now. I wouldn't be averse to that. I think he fits really well with Lovie Smith. And 13 is a pressure point. Look, I think Green Bay and Kansas City are going to have to trade up to get what they want. So any of those teams in the Falcons at 8, the Seattle Seahawks at 9, Texans at 13, Minnesota Vikings at 12. All of those teams could be looking to trade down, and that's where I start thinking that you might actually get some nibbles there. I know Carolina wanted to move down. Nobody's going up to 6. They don't have to, and they know they don't have to. The Giants are setting up Carolina. They're going to take the offensive lineman they want at 5. They'll get the pass rusher they want at 7. And they're locked into that. There is virtually nothing that's going to change that unless Sauce Gardner was there, and I just don't think that's going to happen. So any of those teams that could trade down, one of my favorite scenarios, my 7-round mock draft comes out tomorrow, the final one. This is what I think will happen. And obviously, it's sure to go wrong. But one of my favorite moves is Atlanta trading down from 8 with the Green Bay Packers. And they get 22, they get 28. They can take a kid like David Ajabo. If he doesn't play this year, what does it matter? This team's only, and they're going to win 3 games anyway. So then you'll be in the top 5 next year, get your quarterback, get players that are more of a long-term fit that you're going to get reps this year. And I look at teams and go, why do you never do that? Atlanta doesn't love anybody at 8 except Jermaine Johnson. If he's not there, get out. I know there's teams that would be willing to do it. You may not get the Jimmy Johnson trade chart you may lose a few points there. So what? Get the 2 guys at the back end of the draft, get the 5th-year option, take the risk. That's how you build talent. One of the things that people seem to not quite understand about the NFL, virtually every good team was very bad at one time. The Los Angeles Rams were dreadful for years. But then you get the right coach. Then you start building up the talent base. I mean, yeah, you traded up for Jared Goff, which was not necessarily the greatest idea ever. But you build the talent base, and that's how you go from bad to good.
Jeremy, so where can people get your mock draft?
The name of the show is The Sportsocracy. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, park benches. I mean, basically, if you type that into any search engine, you'll find us. And that's our ESPN Asheville show. We broadcast that on YouTube every day, 3 to 5 Eastern time. And I will be horribly overexposed for about the next 5 days. And then I, like the groundhog, get to hide back in my hole for a few months until mini camps and the season really gets underway.
Well, that's okay, because we are glad to have discovered you, and you came highly recommended, and that's why we reached out to you. So we appreciate the time. One last thing, Jeremy, we've got an Ohio State channel, and I'm sure Buckeye fans would love to get your take and your compare and contrast on Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave.
Garrett Wilson, to me, is the can't miss. When I first started watching the tape, I was really stuck on Wilson because a lot of his best plays were when things broke down. And I let that bother me for a while because I had Garrett Wilson in the later teens of my big board. And then the more I started watching it, the more I went, there's an art to that. And there have been a lot of really good receivers over the years that some of their best things happen when things break down. Now, at Ohio State, what always makes me nervous, Ohio State has so much better talent than who they play in the Big Ten that sometimes that covers deficiencies. That's happened with quarterbacks of theirs over the years. With Garrett Wilson, I think he's much safer. Now, Olave is a phenomenal route runner. I think they're much closer than people think. If you told me one of them busted out, I would say it's Olave. Not necessarily the greatest hands catcher I've ever seen. I always get nervous with guys that allow the ball to get into their body, which is something that he does. But to me, that's one of those things that if you really work with the kid, I don't think it should be a deal breaker. Comps, I see Chris Olave as a Jerry Jeudy type. I think no matter where he goes, he's going to be a very good route runner and safe out of the slot. Worst case scenario, he's the second best receiver on a good team. Now, Garrett Wilson, he can be the A. And I look at Kansas City and Green Bay, and I think they're going to fight over him and Jamison Williams because there is a slight drop if you're looking for the one, the guy that can really shield number one coverage. Garrett Wilson's he's that guy. He can do the deep threat things. I always thought Olave got propped up a little bit by having Garrett Wilson on the other side. And that's not me trying to slight him, because to me, it's Jamison Williams at 1, Garrett Wilson a very close 2. And then you get into Drake London, who I'm really fond of. There's some reservation. He's very big, more Mike Evans type, where I don't know how you're going to separate, but you're going to be a matchup nightmare. And then I've got Olave at 4. So it's not like I think there's a huge difference. I just think one's an A. One's a number one receiver in this league, And I think Olave fits better if he's got somebody on the other side. That's why I like him so much in New Orleans. I love the thought of Olave winding up either in New Orleans or with the Los Angeles Chargers, who are more on a receiver than people think. And I'll tell you another one, just since you said that about Ohio State, watch the Washington Commanders. Everybody has talked about them taking Kyle Hamilton. There is a linebacker in the second round named Chad Moma out of Wyoming that they really like. Hamilton projects as a linebacker in the league. And I won't be shocked if one of those Ohio State receivers goes to Washington 11.
I always compared him this way. Wilson just looked like the beautiful, prototypical NFL receiver, the stride, the look, the body type. And Olave just looks like a baller. He looks like a gym rat. He looks like a guy that if you're short on cornerbacks, you could say, you know what, we need you to fill in a cornerback, and he would just kind of make it work and figure it out. Like he's just a gamer, a baller. He can play ball wherever you throw him, kind of thing, where Garrett Wilson just looks the part.
The Wilson tape, I've always said you could put orchestral music behind it and it would look like it was produced, because he runs so smoothly. And there's something to that. And I can't, for whatever reason, I can't get away from him winding up with Kansas City. Him and Tyreek Hill are very different receivers, obviously. But the mind of Andy Reid, the arm of Pat Mahomes, and the movement of Garrett Wilson just seems to me like one of those things. I get this kid for way cheaper for the next 4 years. And I don't think there would be any drop off. I think he would come into the league and be a top 12 receiver immediately. And I can't get away from it. People ask me this all the time when I do mocks. Do you ever really get beholden to a player ending up with a team? The answer is yes. And one of the highest ones I have this year is the Kansas City Chiefs and Garrett Wilson.
Jeremy Green, ESPN Asheville. If you love the NFL draft, or you're just a guy that says, okay, for these 3 days, I lock into it immediately, you got to get on over there, check out his work, and listen to what he has to say. Jeremy, we appreciate you doing it. Again, you came highly recommended, and I'm glad we caught up with you.
I appreciate that. Anytime, I'm always just a phone call away.